Hello, my name's Karen Hooper, and I'm the director of the MA in Writing program. And I would like to welcome you to our thesis reading this evening. And I would like to begin our evening by thanking all the parents, partners, siblings, friends, babysitters, and coworkers of our students who are here tonight because they recognize the value of this writing work. I'd like to thank, on behalf of our students, each of these friends and family members who maybe helped with tuition, unloaded the dishwasher, or put the kids to bed when technically it wasn't their turn, who read a novel chapter or an essay or the same article for the gazillionth time and gave feedback, for supporting these students in ways large and small. I'd also like to thank our faculty, so many of whom have joined us today, for sharing their considerable expertise with students and giving so generously of their time. I know that this is time that always comes at the expense of their own writing because they care deeply about their students. The time is a gift graciously given, but I know it's not without sacrifice, so thank you. I'd also like to thank our alumni for joining us today. Our alumni are part of our vibrant literary community in cities all across the country, and I'd urge our students to connect with them as they are the ones hosting reading series, networking events, and monthly write-ins, as well as editing literary journals, volunteering as writers in the schools, and participating in writers groups that endure long after their time in the program ends. Thank you for giving back to the community and for keeping the literary flame alive. This spring, we have 21 students graduating, with 9 reading their theses here tonight. But all of our readers have this in common. Each one of our readers tonight has completed a 50 to 75-page thesis of high quality writing. And aside from the publishable work that they will be sending out into the world, I like to also think that we're graduating a cadre of word warriors that will bring to their respective professions, high school teachers, psychiatrists, doctors, actors, a precision of language that clarifies and illuminates rather than obfuscates and baffles. This has been on my mind lately in our current political climate, where intentionally sloppy language, full of nonsensical superlatives and vaguely worded promises, dominate our discourse and sever words from meaning, from their connection to reality and truth. It's made me think of one of my favorite writers, George Orwell, who described this phenomenon in his 1946 essay, Politics and the English Language. He wrote, quote, "Political language, and with the variations, this is true of all political parties, from conservatives to anarchists, is designed to make lies sound truthful and murder respectable, and to give an appearance of solidity to pure wind." End quote. He went on to explain this way, quote, "Now it is clear that the decline of a language must ultimately have political and economic causes. It is not due simply to the bad influence of this or that individual writer, but an effect can become a cause, reinforcing the original cause and producing the same effect in an intensified form, and so on, indefinitely. A man may take to drink because he feels himself to be a failure, and then fail all the more completely because he drinks. It is rather the same thing that is happening to the English language. It becomes ugly and inaccurate because our thoughts are foolish, but the slovenliness of our language makes it easier for us to have foolish thoughts. The point is that the process is reversible. Modern English, especially written English, is full of bad habits which spread by imitation and which can be avoided if one is willing to take the necessary trouble. If one gets rid of these habits, one can think more clearly. And to think clearly is a necessary first step toward political regeneration." End quote. So it is with confidence, optimism, and tremendous excitement that I welcome you to this reading tonight, where each of these writers demonstrates a commitment to writing their truth with clarity, insight, precision, and an unflinching gaze. You are in for a treat. And now I'd like to introduce my colleague, Kathy Flan, who will be introducing our readers.
Good evening. I'm Kathy Flan, and I've had the privilege to teach the thesis course this semester, along with my co-teacher and our illustrious program director, Karen Hupert, who you just met, who is truly a champion of students' progress at every stage. She works hard in ways we can all see, and she also works behind the scenes, attending to issues great and small that make this wonderful program what it is. And I think in hearing her remarks, you can see a glimpse of that. So thank you, Karen. Um, I know I speak for Karen and the faculty who have served as committee members for each thesis when I say we're delighted to honor tonight what these graduates have accomplished. The great American writer Toni Morrison once said, "I would like my work to do two things, be as demanding and sophisticated as I want it to be, and at the same time be accessible in a sort of emotional way to lots of people, just like jazz." That's a hard task, but that's what I want to do. Tonight, we celebrate the creative work of our graduates who have completed a hard task because that is what they wanted to do. You will hear excerpts from their work that embody Morrison's words. Their writing is demanding, it's sophisticated, but it is also accessible in an emotional way. I've been honored to work with our graduates these past few months as they completed their final semester and their final course. For 2 years, they have been hard at work producing original material, studying practical and theoretical books on the art of writing, reading the great writers closely to study craft, and workshopping the manuscripts of their classmates, thus learning the skills of an editor. They have been finding and fine-tuning their individual creative voices, and we are thrilled to share their words with you this evening. So tonight, you'll hear excerpts from a wide range of nonfiction and fiction stories written in a variety of styles. These fiction and nonfiction pieces will encounter a bereaved protagonist tempted to use forbidden magic to bring her sister back, an author coming to terms with her granddaughter's emergency liver transplant, a character whose truck hit something unexpected on a country road, and many other fascinating people and places. Let me say this to the graduates. For your professors, many of whom are here tonight, this is an especially rewarding evening. We are seeing the culmination of your work, and we will recognize many of the pieces you're reading because we saw them first in a workshop, and we watched as you carefully and painstakingly revised, edited, and expanded the writing. Nobody knows better than we do that this work is hard work. As Toni Morrison said, it's a hard task. The challenge is to sit with a world you have conjured up on the page, to render it realistic to a skeptical reader, and have no doubt even fantasy, science fiction, magical realism, they must all feel real to your readers, and finally to make it emotionally accessible to your audience. We congratulate you on this tremendous accomplishment, and we are very excited to see where you go next. So let's begin our evening. The graduates will each read for a few minutes from their thesis, following the order in the program. We begin tonight with Gary Levi.
Thank you for tuning in tonight. My reading is from my novel in progress titled Johnny Splendiseed. It's set in post-apocalyptic, post-conflict, post-breakup America. The main character is Cliff Chapman, a childless widower, numb with grief over the death of his darling wife, Eva. He has no lifetime accomplishments and nothing left to live for. He's desperate to create a positive legacy. He sells his home of 30 years and sets off on a journey to emulate his boyhood hero, Johnny Appleseed, by distributing Splenda packets imprinted with inspirational messages. About 250 miles out, in the middle of nowhere, his hydrovan breaks down. He sends out a distress signal and has no choice but to wait and hope for help. The reading picks up there. Tension sweat crawls against Chapman's skin like ants at a sticky bun picnic. And before he can think better of it, he finds himself waiting outside, leaning against his van under the harvest moon in a patch of pale orange light, letting the cool autumn air dry him off. Everything is still, quiet, calming, not so bad. He can see stars. He hasn't done anything open air like this in what, a decade? 4? He inhales the mournful aroma of fallen leaves. Cicadas scream, desperate to mate before the January frost kills them off. He hears the rustling of animals in the thick woods, faint brushings and loud cracklings. He wonders how natural animal life is even possible after everything that's happened. In his walled-in sector of Blue East, animals are for zoos or West Coast cloning labs. There's a splash of undergrowth, and a possum emerges from the dark and staggers across the road, lurching under the weight of 6 cubs or pups or whatever they're called, clinging to her back, her claws scraping against asphalt. She swerves to avoid Chapman's rock-ported left foot and steps into a partially filled crater, possibly from a mortar round. One of the babies falls off, hits the blacktop, starts making sneezing noises, curls into a ball the size of a toddler's fist, and freezes, its tiny teeth bared in what Chapman reads as anguish. Unaware or indifferent, Mama keeps right on going. The rest of the newborn brood hang on by their tiny claws, swaying and jouncing with every hurried step. I'll be darned, Chapman says. Chapman gets lucky. A guy working for Fission Tow, most demanded when you're stranded, had been scanning the sat bands, trolling for business. He picked up Chapman's weak distress signal and, by triangulating or vectoring or however he did it, arrived with a flatbed truck in less than 20 minutes. This flatbed guy, who according to the embroidery in his work shirt, is named J. Vern. He starts winching Chapman's defunct van up the ramp onto the flatbed and gives Chapman the once-over. Rutgers hoodie, Dockers, and Rockports. I see you're not from around here, Vern says, extra loud above the grating squeal of the winch. He looks down at the curled-up, reeking baby opossum. But you need to do something about that there Joey. The van crests the ramp and rolls onto the flat surface of the back flat top. They fall off on the reg when the mother's on the move, he says, shutting off the winch and the squeal, his loud voice now a shout echoing from opposing tree lines. But she ain't coming back for it. Chapman has been standing a body length from Vern with his hands in his Dockers pockets, a helpless bystander watching a road rescue professional ply their trade. Good Lord, that smell, Chapman says. I thought it was dead. Vern, who's bolting down the wheels of the van with a ratchet of some sort, looks up and shakes his hand. Did you now? He says. He wipes his hands on overalls that never should have been white in the first place and leaps off the flatbed. He goes into the cab and emerges with a flattened, lubricant-stained box. Got an old towel in your rig? He asks, unflattening the box. Don't think so, Chapman says. Vern glances at Chapman's well-worn hoodie. How about we repurpose that ratty thing? Hold on, Chapman says, remembering. With a wince, a grunt, and a knee crunch, he climbs up onto the flatbed, reaches into the van, and fetches a coral-colored monogram bath towel. Part of a set Eva was proud to tell her book club friends she designed herself and proclaimed too nice to use. Chapman wraps the plush towel around his neck and uses his arms to ease himself off the flatbed. He heads back toward Vern. Find a doily in your fanny pack? Vern asks. This Vern guy is not funny, not even a little bit, particularly because Chapman might have remembered to bring along his fanny pack, you know, the neon green one. Chapman unwraps the towel from his neck, glances at it, and notices something for the first time. The monogram consists of 3 letters in descending height, E, C, and C. Hey, just a doggone minute. Chapman hands the towel to Vern. You can take this one. It has a design defect. Vern grabs the towel, buries his anteater nose in it, and sniffs. Lovely. Lavender potpourri? The bouquet of Eva, still there, here, everywhere, wrapped fragrantly around his neck. Vern picks up the inert, rancid ball of a possum and swaddles it in Eva's lovely sacrificial towel, which now has a use she might approve of. He places the cocoon critter gingerly into the box and calls the Opossum Rescue Alliance. Chapman crosses his arms against a sudden chill. I really thought the little thing was dead. That possum ain't dead, friend. It's playing possum. Chapman tightens his arms as if hugging himself and ponders the difference between playing dead and playing alive. Next, I'd like to introduce our next reader, Hannah Edenfield.
Thank you, Gary. My name is Hannah, and this is an excerpt from the opening chapter of my young adult novel, When the Dead Scream, about a girl who embarks on a quest to raise her sister from the dead. In this chapter, she attempts forbidden magic to speak with her sister's ghost before her sister is buried. You walk across the bones of those who came before you. Best be that you do not wake them. Inscription on the last Moravian graveyard gate. Whisperlin Moreau stumbled through the dark in her nightgown, a feverishness to her steps. There would be no reasoning with herself. She clutched a faded scrap of silk, stolen from the ashes of her sister's burned belongings. She had read the warnings inscribed on the graveyard gate 100 times. Best be that you do not wake them. A warning because the ghosts of Lake Adelaide could be woken. She'd done it by accident years ago. Tonight, she'd do it again to wake Lily before she was buried and her soul put to rest. One hand clutched at her chest, tangled in ribbon. At her hip, a blade etched with words in a language she couldn't understand. They hadn't told her how Lily had died, mother and father. Maybe it had been too awful. There'd been no place to store the body until burial, so they'd let Lily rest in her old room 2 doors down from Whispers. The cold of the door's locked handle still lingered in her palm. Tonight, that cold had seeped into her room, raising the fine hair along her arms. Even her last glimpse of her sister had been denied. She'd fumbled with the lock on Lily's door, and she'd heard something, the softest scratching like mice feet along wood. Bigger, though, than the little white rodents who hid in the manor walls. But the lock hadn't budged, and tomorrow they were burying her, Lily. She had to speak to her sister. She had to know what happened, how she died. She had to say goodbye. Whisper careened through crumbling beach graves to the frothing waters of Lake Adelaide, snow accumulating in her blue hair. It would be a ghoulish combination, the snow and hair, transforming her into something more ghost than girl. Maybe it was an omen. Soot still clung to her, smeared on her arms and cheek from where she'd clawed through ash. The ribbon had been the only surviving piece of Lily, a brittle, limp swath of fabric that thrashed around when the wind tried to snatch it from her fingers. The fire had burned white hot, eating at the strands of magic fueling its flicker. Burning the dead's belongings had never bothered Whisper before, but seeing the way those flames leapt across Lily's dried flower crowns and white dresses and old spell books burned a piece of Whisper too. Between the forest edge and lake lay a narrow span of sand and headstone, then a steep incline where Lake Adelaide had begun spooning loose graves into her depths, stealing back the shoreline marked with brittle bones. Whisper's boots were stiff and unwieldy, stolen from the manor's gardens when she'd snuck away. When she reached the slope, she tripped forward. She did try to reach for magic and steady herself, but magic never played nicely with Whisper. She gasped and fell. The graveyard and moonless sky blurred, and she skidded down the beach on her back, her nightgown hitching to her hips. She clawed at the sand, and grit burned beneath her nails. She tried to reach for even a trickle of magic, but it wasn't enough. She hit the lake water. Cold doused her hair, her ears, flooding her mouth, rushing down her throat. She rolled, sand in her teeth, a burst of white behind her eyes. She smacked into a headstone jutting out in the water and grabbed the edge. When she hauled herself upright, a piece crumbled into her palm. Needles in her chest, snow in her nose. She shoved herself back towards the edge of the lake. Whisper's mouth tasted of ash, as if Adelaide had so bloated herself on graves, she was merely a grave herself. The water burned her skin. On a night like this, when sediment from the lake bottom still seethed from a night of freezing rain, the water was practically onyx. It streaked like ink across her skin, already beginning to freeze. Her nightgown stiffened with frost, the blue lace like glacier. Deep gouges marred the sand from her tumble, but snow had already begun to fill the holes. The upper ledge remained empty. No one had seen. Barely anyone knew about the graveyard. Lily had discovered it years ago, but the island was small, and Whisper was never far from her mother and father's gaze. If they knew she'd snuck out this evening, or that she'd gone for a swim in the lake with one of their prized blades, she whirled back towards Adelaide. On her knees, she caught her breath in the shallows and clung to the fabric still tangled in her fingers. Lily had worn a ribbon every day in her blonde hair. Tomorrow, she would be buried in one. Whisper's breath swirled opaque before her. All her life, Whisper had been told she walked across the bones of her ancestors. The Moreaus had long since forsaken graveyards, burying their dead across the island. No caskets, no coffins, no markers. An aunt by the garden, a grandfather by the cliffs, 3 cousins by the well. The entire island had become a graveyard. Even though she was surrounded by death, Whisper's fingers still shook. Lily, on the other hand, had relished it. As a child, Lily made up games about feeding stories to the ghosts. It was Lily who had first discovered this forgotten graveyard. Lily who had played hide and seek among the headstones. Now it was Lily who was dead. Up next, I'd like to introduce Marcella Kogan.
Thank you, Hannah. Memories flicker like fireflies, sunshine pressing against drawn shades, bars in a cage, faint breath against my cheek, heartbeat quickening, eyes squeezed shut, body still, a corpse. Lips like raw meat, the hard scratch of stubble against skin. His whisper, a rasping sound, an icy grip. Small feet dangling off the edge of the bed. With this paragraph, I begin my memoir, Silence in the Crib. The image has haunted me for decades, yet only recently, in my late 50s, did I realize that the breath brushing against my cheek was my father's. The child-sized feet hanging from the mattress edge were my own. In the memoir, I trace my path through the fog of repressed memories and awaken to the truth of the trauma. A key feature of the memoir is a direct address to the reader who must hear my story if I am to heal. I confronted my father about the abuse. I would like to share this scene with you now. Barreling down the hall of my parents' senior housing complex to apartment 4C, I stormed through the door and marched towards the couch where my father is sitting, watching the news. I know what you did all those years, I berate him, breathless. At 5'3", I'm hardly a towering figure, but I glare at him, daring him to respond. Papi, 89, is slow on the uptake. His initial smile upon seeing his only daughter turns into a frown. He presses the mute button on the TV remote control. Hola, Marcelita. My mother, sitting at the dining room table with her siddur, a Jewish prayer book, by her side, rises and springs toward me with a plate of apple slices. I wave her away, my eyes fixed on my father. I know what you did to me. I continue, my throat tight, bombarded with images of our rides to secluded parks, the hypnotism sessions to relax me, and his nightly visits to my bedroom. Papi registers my words. A sly look appears on the face of this suave, slippery man I had worshipped since childhood. He is proud of himself for getting away with it all his life. Really, he says, smirking, his Argentinian accent pronounced, despite 50 years of living in the United States. How come after all these years I wondered if you remembered something? His voice is calm, and he casts a curious glance in my direction. The apartment feels unbearably hot on this snowy wintry afternoon, but I don't take off my coat. The sun shines through the floor-to-ceiling windows, reflecting light on my father's dental cabinet, the only piece of furniture he kept from his practice, which now stores random objects such as rubber bands and coins. My heart sinks at what I take to be his confession. How could you? I whimper, my anger yielding to yearning for straightforward, uncorrupted love. I was so young. I search his blue, sparkly eyes for an explanation for his betrayal. Didn't he love me? Was there a mistake? His expression changes suddenly. ¿Qué decís? What do you say? He leans back, defensive, his eyes shifting. You're lying, I blurt out. I don't care what you say because I know it's true. ¿De qué estás hablando? What are you talking about? My phone rings, and I know it's my older son calling to say he's ready to be picked up at the school. I let it ring. ¿Qué pasa? My mother's eyes narrow. She sits still, an apple slice poised by her lips. I yearned to plead with her to believe me, but brace myself against her rejection. My understanding that she would not, could not save me felt familiar, an ancient right, a stamp in my record. I sensed that if my mother were to believe me, she would be violating the gentleman's agreement she made with my father long ago, an unspoken contract sealing my fate as my father's possession. Her eyes shift from me to him, neurons firing in her brain, my words a foreign language in a distant land. I imagine her finally decoding sounds into meaning and wondering whether her suspicions about my father were true despite his denials. He's lying. He knows what he has done. I storm out of the apartment. My mother hurries after me, but stops at the door, poking her head out into the hallway like she always does when I leave her apartment, as if to prolong our visit for another minute. This time, I press the elevator call button repeatedly and see out of the corner of my eye that she has not moved. She does not follow me. Dear reader, shortly after I confronted my father, I started seeing a trauma therapist to help me understand how the abuse impacted my life. How could I not have known what happened? Who was I back then? It is possible, reader, to lead two separate lives. One where the abuse happens underground, concealed even from myself, and the other living in the real world above the silence. Writing is the only way out of the darkness. It cracks the stone in my heart, granting me access to myself. To heal, I must unearth my shattered self, brush off the debris, and examine the wreckage. But, reader, I'm frightened of the night. Stroll with me through the museum of my life so we can examine the exhibits of my odd behaviors, the relics of my past, the bones of my childhood, my reptilian self. Help me find my story. But I worry about how you will react. Will you want to hear about the sex or the silence? The silence, reader, my silence. Every word I write will sound off sirens of his atrocities. Every word I write will bring me closer to the truth. Words will turn to sentences, sentences into paragraphs, paragraphs into chapters, chapters into books. This book, read me, and then tell me, reader, who do you think I am? Next, I would like to introduce Jennifer Rittenauer.
Thank you, Marcella. Hello, everyone. Tonight I'm going to read a short autofiction story that was generated in my thesis advisor, Susan Moati Daraj's writing identity course. It's called The Makeover. I am a dork. I never was cool in any way, shape, or form. I always wanted to be cool and often tried hard to fit in, but I never succeeded, except for one night during my 6th grade dance. I attended a majority Latino school in the Los Angeles Unified School District during the early 90s, and I could never nail the cool girl Latina aesthetic. My frizzy hair was a mall bang mess with a mid-level ponytail secured with a scrunchie. I didn't wear contact lenses then. Instead, I wore real glasses, plastic pink ones with large, thick lenses. I had double-fanged teeth, and I was certain that my future held braces. One of my classmates brought her older sister to school to style our hair and do our makeup before the dance. I never wore makeup except for the chapstick my mom bought at the grocery store. No one had a crush on me, and I didn't expect anyone to want to dance with me, but I hoped to woo Edgar Martinez into a slow dance if I got a makeover. The bell rang, and my best friend Dahlia and I ran to the girls' bathroom where a line had formed. Girls entered and exited the bathroom with winged eyeliner, maroon lipstick, and blown out bangs. I could hardly wait. Dahlia wasn't interested in boys. Her focus was more on the oddities of life and entertainment like Weird Al. However, she said she was curious about the makeover and went with me. The truth was, she didn't need one. Her teeth were straight, her hair was silky rather than frizzy like mine, and she didn't need glasses. Her clothes were normal, t-shirt, jeans, a pair of Vans shoes, but nothing in neon. We approached the makeover girl who sat on a wooden stool that she took from the classroom. Her little sister stood beside her and held the makeup caboodle case. The makeover girl scanned me from head to toe. "Oh, girl," she said, "you need help. Take off those glasses and pull out that scrunchie." "But I can't see," I said. She pursed her lips. I removed my glasses and tucked them in my back pocket, and then I removed my scrunchie and placed it on my wrist. I didn't know how she did it. I just remember tugging, combing, and cold gel applied to my flyaways, the swiping on of eyeliner and mascara. My eyes watered, my eyelids shook, and my lips felt waxy. In one final cloud of aquanet, she was done. Can't do nothing about the clothes, though. I looked down at my dorky clothes. I noticed that the girls entering and exiting the bathroom wore skirts with ruffled midriff tops, even though they weren't allowed to. I wore light denim, black and hot pink LA Gear sneakers, and a baby blue floral top. "What do I do?" I asked. Dahlia braided her fingers together and placed her hands under her chin as if her head were on a platter. "Just do this and no one will notice," she said. "I mean," the makeover girl said, "it's better than nothing." "Thanks," I said. Makeover girl's little sister extended her hand and asked for $5. I didn't have $5, so I gave her $1, which she placed in the bottom tier of the caboodle makeup case. Then they focused on Dahlia, who was much less of a challenge than I was. I walked up to the sinks, looked in the mirror, and of course, didn't see my reflection. I put my glasses on and saw that I looked cool, pretty even. My bangs were a teased poof, my hair stretched into a high ponytail at the top of my head. My lips were maroon, and like all the cool girls, I had winged eyeliner. I took a step back and nodded at myself in the mirror and felt like a badass. As Dahlia and I left the bathroom and walked to the auditorium, I felt a flutter of hope that Edgar Martinez would dance with me. I imagined presenting my face and hair as a focal point, hoping he would overlook my clothes. We walked into the auditorium, and inside we saw paper streamers, punch bowls, plates of cookies, an open dance floor, balloons, and the shh of Vanilla Ice's Ice Ice Baby playing overhead. The boys stood on one side and the girls stood on the other. Everyone looked at me wide-eyed and smiling for my makeover. Suddenly, I became the center of attention in a positive way for a change, and I embraced it. I stood by the punch bowl with Dahlia and looked for Edgar Martinez, and there he was. Short, cute, wearing a buttoned-up shirt. He had a lazy eye, but I didn't care. He was really into Michael Jackson. For the school talent show that year, he performed the entire Smooth Criminal dance in one. He did the moonwalk and glided across the stage. I stared at him and imagined him gliding over to me and asking me to dance. The song changed to Criss Cross's Jump. The girls grabbed me while the boys grabbed Edgar Martinez. They dragged us to the center of the dance floor. We collided and bumped our heads hard, and all I could think about was how I really didn't want to get lice again. Edgar Martinez fell onto the floor. I stumbled backward and surprisingly didn't fall. We met in the center again as the song changed to a slow one. Vanessa Williams' Save the Best for Last played, and all around the auditorium, the boys and girls said, "Ooh," while Edgar Martinez and I danced. Our cheeks were red, his hands rested on my waist, and my sweaty hands gripped his shoulders. I looked down at him while he gazed up at me. I wasn't even tall. It felt like too much eye contact, so we looked over each other's shoulders. I stepped on his feet the entire time. My glasses were still in my pocket. When the song ended, we parted ways. I walked over to Dahlia, who smiled at me, told me she couldn't stop herself from creating a voiceover narration about Edgar Martinez and me dancing like Kevin and Winnie Cooper in the Wonder Years. We laughed, ate cookies, drank punch, and then Dahlia and I jumped around to House of Pain's Jump Around. A lot of songs had the word jump in them back then. I had no idea it was so obvious to everyone that I liked Edgar Martinez. I wondered if it was clear that he liked me because I never guessed that he did. Later, Dahlia told me we always stared at each other in class and it was really annoying. I came home that night and my mother yelled about my makeup. I didn't want to wash it off or undo my poof bangs, but I had to shower, otherwise I would smell. I tried hard to recreate that look, but I had no idea how the girl did it. I came to school the next day with messed up mall bangs, glasses, and no makeup. I was me again, a dork. Dahlia always accepted me though, and I felt thankful for her. But it did feel nice to fit in with the cool kids, even if just for one night. Thank you, everyone. And now, please welcome our next reader, Gloria Levine.
Thank you, Jennifer. My reading is an abridged version of the first personal essay in a collection about our granddaughter Willow when she had an emergency transplant at 13. The long night. Late afternoon Sunday, the screaming began. All day, my 13-year-old granddaughter's voice had grown fainter and fainter, and her words more garbled. Willow was becoming more ill, but her transplant surgery was not scheduled until Tuesday morning. I was already worried she might not make it to the operating room. As I was returning from the coffee shop to the pediatric intensive care unit where she lay waiting to have a lobe of her father's liver placed in her, I heard a scream. I stopped cold. Was that Willow? I wasn't sure because the voice I heard was not her voice, nor, for that matter, did it seem human. As I entered the room, the nurse looked perfectly composed, business as usual, as she fussed with the many lines of Willow's IV pole. Then the scream came again. It was inside the room. It was Willow. I had difficulty orienting myself as I moved toward the bed. Here was this beauty of a child, once so verbal and vibrant, now reduced to a twitching and screaming body, bared lips, teeth showing like an animal. She had not been like that when I left. A few moments earlier, as I was returning, Alicia, Willow's mom, and my daughter had walked away with no smile or wave, very unusual. Taken turns for a few days now, she and I had not left Willow alone, even for a moment. I stayed nights, she stayed days, but we overlapped a lot. But always, on our way back and forth, we visited, or at least gave a friendly wave. The screaming penetrated viscerally, but it had not been my first shock. I had flown to Vancouver from Minnesota on Thursday morning, going directly from the airport to the emergency room. My first image was of green skin in the shape of my granddaughter. Willow is green, her skin a shade similar to tree leaves. Eventually, I saw her yellow eyes and dark red urine. Even though I had been a hospital chaplain, I had never seen such sights. I had noticed the blue skin of patients before open heart surgery. I had also been exposed to the raw red skin of burn victims, and I had witnessed the gray skin of the dying, but never green. How could someone be green? We soon learned that Willow was in acute liver failure due to Wilson disease, a rare and obscure condition in which the liver cannot metabolize copper. The metal had been collecting undiscovered in my granddaughter's liver since she was born. A recent onset of mononucleosis had finally overwhelmed Willow's organ. In this era of the scream, as I thought of it, my perceptions reduced primarily to noticing color. Of course, the green of Willow. In contrast, her sheets were white, as were her blankets. The few blue stripes on the blankets stood out to me. In my altered state, the blankets seemed to me to be prayer shawls. We needed prayers, prayers for Willow to live, and I needed prayers for strength to bear this screaming. Willow no longer wore a hospital gown or even a diaper, just a pad under her and the white blanket with blue stripes covering her. Only the braces on her teeth reminded me that she was a teenager who once was singing and dancing. Now she was reduced to this body that emitted these excruciating screams. Horrified, I didn't know if I could bear to listen. I prayed harder. Please, God, help me get through this. I stood by her bed, holding her hand. Grandma and Mommy are here, Willow. We're not going to leave you alone. Abba, Daddy, is going to give you part of his liver. Touch and sound get through the most, as I'd learned my time in hospitals. As the hours wore on, I began to hear rather than see. The IV machines provided a quiet background whir, except when they beeped. Muted conversation occurred in the hallway, but all I could hear were Willow's screams. You could hear them all over the ICU. Were the others tormented by them as much as I? The screaming continued every 5 or 10 minutes. I never let go of Willow's hand and frequently spoke to her. As I listened through the evening, I began to have the impression that the screaming was not in response to pain, but rather involuntary, an autonomic reaction to something, such as the alkaline ammonia that was seeping into her brain. Willow was reduced to an elemental level of functioning. Her liver had completely failed, and machines were keeping our dear child alive. We had 40 hours to go until the surgery, and more immediately, a very long night ahead. Would singing help? If this is just nerve cells firing, perhaps something rhythmic might be able to soothe her. So every time Willow screamed, I would sing one of the songs I had used as lullabies to her mother when she was a baby. Oh, Shenandoah, I long to see you. The first time the music started, Willow's body twitched a bit. The singing had reached her tortured brain. So I decided that every time she uttered a scream, I would sing another song in my small repertoire. Wade in the water, children. God's gonna trouble the water. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Her body calmed a bit. The best, though, was a spiritual. Swing low, sweet chariot, comin' for to carry me home. Willow's body stilled. She seemed to be listening. I made the syncopation even more pronounced, and I changed the words. This was a song about going over to the other side, about dying. I was not going to put that idea in her mind. So I changed the words to comin' for to carry me along. The screaming slowed, now maybe to every 20 minutes or half hour as night deepened. I laid down, sometimes fell asleep, but every time she screamed, I jumped up, held her hand, and sang. She especially seemed to like Swing Low. It all felt so primitive, just rhythms reaching those firing synapses and calming them for a moment. Strength grew in me, and I knew I could do this as long as needed. Keep singing and touch, sing and touch. Elemental, just like Willow. I breathed a prayer of gratitude. And that is what happened. Every 20 to 30 minutes all night, whenever a scream came out of her, I held her hand and sang. At shift change, 7 a.m., I stepped out for a coffee. When I returned, only the whir of the IV machines could be heard. What had happened? Willow was still here, but now a tube was in her throat. She had been intubated the few minutes I was away, placed on a respirator. She could no longer make sounds. The screaming had ended. On the one hand, it was a relief. On the other, it was more ominous, for intubation meant Willow was in more distress and needed more support to stay alive. I continued praying. We had 24 more hours to go. And now I'd like to introduce Catherine.
Hi, thank you all for coming. My name is Catherine Smart, and my memoir and essays is called Army/Girl. It's framed around 8 visits to Berlin over 40 years, and it uses each visit to explore the Army's impact on me as an Army brat, as a soldier, and later as an Army spouse. I'll be reading the beginning of the memoir, which starts way back in the 1980s. The First Berlin, 1988. The first Berlin is the one you see from the dirty window on a tour bus in February. You sit in the back, trying not to let your car sickness show because you're 17 and somewhere short of cool, and you don't want the other kids to laugh at you. You and 100-ish American exchange students are spending your senior year of high school in the Federal Republic of Germany on State Department scholarships. Your job is to learn about OMAs and recycling and public transportation and how not to be an asshole American. After 7 months living with host families, your group takes a week-long trip to Berlin, the symbolic beating heart of the West in Cold War Europe. That morning, Dave, the exchange program counselor, briefs you about the inter-German border crossing. He's upbeat but firm. You are minors and US citizens traveling in a country that your country doesn't recognize. We all want to avoid an international incident, he tells the group. You can see the capital letters when he talks. Even that too cool guy, Brandon with the surfer hair, shuts up and listens. You learn there are only 3 highway routes that connect West Berlin to Western Germany. That East Germany authorized your bus to navigate the 254 kilometers from Hamburg to Berlin. That if the bus leaves the highway, you will all be detained. This knowledge is simultaneously creepy and delicious. The convoy reaches East Germany at the Gudow-Zarenton border crossing. It's hard to know when. The sky's doing that German winter thing where it stays the same shade of iron gray from daybreak to dusk. You feel like an explorer in uncharted lands when your bus lumbers through the serpentine barriers at the Zarenton guard shack. You buzz with energy and nerves, fueled by strong, thick coffee and way too many candy bars. The East German highway is really just pads of concrete, whip-stitched together like a hole in an old sock. The bus tires clickety-clack over the seams in the road, a soundtrack to your trip. The only traffic is cars with West German license plates heading east. You see no towns, no life, just winter farm fields. These are agricultural collectives, not the tumbling, lush patchwork of individual farms you see from your bedroom window in your adopted West German home for the year. These fields are like nothing you've ever seen before. Massive tracts covered in post-harvest stubble. Frozen brown rectangles carved into the earth. A statement, man's victory over the soil. Now, hours later, you reach the Berlin border checkpoint. You strain to catch a glimpse of real live East German border guards doing East German border guard things in a scarily titillating East German border guard way. You're almost disappointed when all you see is an elaborate minuet of paperwork stamping between the bus driver and the guard. Then East Germany expels you, flings you out of its gray flatness into the Western carbuncle embedded in its thigh. You are now entering the American sector. This highway is not segmented. It is smooth and dark and modern. You are on Spanische Allee in the American zone of free West Berlin, and you know this because the big blue Autobahn sign tells you that's where you are, as the bus headlights split the gray February air in two like the wall through this divided city. Actually, no. The first Berlin is earlier. It's the one you become aware of from your third-floor apartment at the beginning of a new decade, the 1980s. You live on an American Army base in a Bavarian city in Germany, where you share a bunk bed with your little sister. You learn about the troubles happening in Northern Ireland from that Police song. You learn of the existence of Berlin and the way your grandmother sees things now that she has macular degeneration, from the sides, the blurry edges, but not looking at them directly. You learn that Berlin is, for you, off limits because your dad works in military intelligence and has a security clearance and can't go there without specific permission. You listen to your dad talk in your living room with his work buddies after long shifts as radio interceptors. You sneak into the bathroom after bedtime to eavesdrop on their grown-up conversations, peek around the corner and watch your dad crush out a cigarette in the heavy glass ashtray on the coffee table. He asks your mom to grab him another Pilsner. Your dad's friends sit on the rust-brown plaid couch in their polyester zip jackets as cigarette smoke curls around their heads. They talk about Berlin, this somewhere place that ekes out its daily life among fences and watchtowers. You learn there's a concrete wall around the eastern chunk of the city. It keeps out people like him and you because you're his daughter and so you must be a threat to the communist regime, even though you're only 11 years old, even though you just got braces and your legs are not yet long enough to ride the bike you bought with your babysitting money. In this third-floor apartment on other days, you listen to the television news announcers talk about the world on fire all around you. They talk about a man named Anwar Sadat who was assassinated. They talk about hijacked planes, about the Red Army faction and the car bomb at Ramstein Air Base and the anti-nuclear protests outside military bases, like the one where you live. You think of the bomb threats at your school, how you can think of them as plural, and how that's hard to explain to your grandparents when you write to them. You remember the bomb threat that happened during your math test the other day when the whole school was evacuated to the football field while the MPs and the bomb dogs cleared the building. You sat there, the entire student body on the bleachers. Some kids tossed a football around. You were American teenagers doing teenager things in a place made for teenagers, while the grown-ups of your community checked the lunchroom for explosives. After a few hours, they called you back into the building. Nobody ever told you what happened after the all clear. Everybody just went back to algebra. The radio announcers also talk about Berlin. They say it's a symbol of resistance, that just to be in West Berlin is a sign of bravery. You start to listen to Radio Free Europe, mostly because the music is better than the country stuff you get on AFN. Later that year, you listen to Nina sing about 99 red balloons, about how a misunderstanding over a simple balloon ignites a nuclear war between the Soviets and the Americans. You think knowingly that you understand. I'll be followed by Nicole Choi.
Thank you, Catherine. I'll be reading a few pages from a personal essay called Language Barriers, where different native languages between my mom and me create communication missteps, frustrations, and hurt feelings. It's one of 6 essays in my thesis, which attempts to uncover and organize an honest personal history that integrates my Korean and American identities. On a cloudy February evening in 2021, I parked my car in Bethany 40, a shopping center in Ellicott City, Maryland that's dominated by Korean businesses. With its all-brick exterior and rusted iron staircases, the building looks like it's stuck in the 1990s. It stands off of Route 40, a national highway called the Main Street of America that extends from New Jersey to Utah. A portion of the Main Street of America that passes through Maryland is designated as Korean Way. With over 160 Korean-owned businesses in the county, my people's influence is evident. My mom and I sit in my parked car for a few moments, looking at a sign. On it are 3 lines written in Hangul, the Korean alphabet. My mom, teasing, asked if I can read it. With my stiff American tongue, I try to combine the sounds into words, but instead, I pronounce each letter individually. I stop reading after 2 words. You sound so American when you speak. Soya ing, she says, forming exaggerated shapes with her lips. The English translation at the bottom tells me the sign is asking customers to dispose of their trash and keep the shopping center clean. The Korean sounds I struggled to pronounce, shopping, compose the Korean transliteration for shopping center. My mom says to record myself trying to read the sign so she can listen to it whenever she needs a laugh or after we fight again. Yeah, I respond. I'm not driving you back home after dinner. You can find your own ride. My mom continues to laugh as we walk towards Yennar Yetjok, a Korean restaurant. The name appears in Hangul on the restaurant's awning. It sits on the ground floor of the 2-level shopping center that's peppered with long-standing businesses, including a taekwondo studio, a sports pub, and Zephyr Hookah Cafe. Yennar Yetjok translates to a long, long time ago. I almost always frequent the restaurant with my mom. There are negative Yelp reviews about its service, mainly that the Korean waitresses neither greet nor remain attentive to patrons who don't speak their language. Your best bet for a positive dining experience is to either be fluent in Korean or bring a fellow diner who is. My mom and I both respond in Korean to the waitress's greeting, but it's she who gives our order and tells the waitress we would like a hot glass of boricha, the customary barley tea served at traditional Korean restaurants. The TV above the bar is turned to the golf channel, and everyone in the restaurant is speaking in Korean. The couple with their baby sitting in the booth behind us, the group of grandmas and grandpas gathered at the 2 center tables. My mom and I, though, continue to converse in English. I tell her I'm sorry again for our fight earlier that afternoon and that I'll try to be more patient. Just a few hours before sitting together at Yennar Yetjok, my mom had called me into her office. I need your grammar help, she said. She tried to define accounting terms in the email she had drafted to her coworker, but I cut her off. I don't understand the relationship between your first 2 sentences, I said, hovering above her chair. How are these 2 sentences connected to each other? She tried to define the terms again. You're not answering my question, I began to raise my voice. I don't need to know the details. Is the sentence describing the problem and the second sentence a solution to that problem? Never mind, I don't need your help, my mom responded. Sorry for bothering you. I went back to my desk. After a few deep breaths, I returned, ready to help again, but saw her sitting still with her gaze fixed on her computer screen. "Are you crying?" I asked. When I heard no response, I sat by her feet. She let her tears fall and said, "You make me feel dumb." "I wasn't trying to make you feel dumb," I replied in defense. "I was just confused by your email and trying to help." But I had already hurt my mom. "You make me wonder what I've been doing for the past 40 years, she said. "Why I'm not better, why I still struggle." My mom immigrated to America when she was 16. Always assuring her in earnest to not be insecure about her English, I assumed my mom was no longer insecure. But it's true that she finds English grammar challenging. She mixes up pronouns, like using they to refer to singular subjects, or sometimes referring to a woman as he in conversation because what she speaks aloud in English doesn't always match what she's thinking. She still dreams in Korean, and she speaks Korean to her friends and family. But she speaks in English to my older brother and me. We, like many other second-generation Korean Americans, are not fluent in our family's language. She accepts my apology, and we eat the side dishes the waitress has put on our table while gossiping about coworkers and friends. Our main dishes soon arrive, and bright red broths bubble away in hot stone bowls. 2 slurps later, an old man with a taut face, bushy eyebrows, and who smells of soju, Korean liquor, makes his way over to our table. I don't know who he is, but he calls my mom by her Korean name, Myungi. I greet him, "안녕하세요," while bowing my head. He holds my mom's hand, and she makes room for him to sit down. I don't understand their conversation, but I contribute intermittent nods and smiles and take polite spoonfuls of my soup while scrolling through Instagram. I'm nearly finished with my soup by the time the old man stands up. He begins speaking to me, but my mom interjects and tells him I don't understand Korean. He smiles, pats my hand, gives my mom a hug, and goes back to his table. Dabbing her face with her napkin, my mom informs me that she and the old man were speaking about her late father. He passed away 23 years ago, but she still cries when recalling memories of him. The old man had been good friends with my grandfather in South Korea, and they remained friends when they immigrated to Baltimore, Maryland. I look over to the old man's table, filled with the other first-generation immigrants who spent their childhoods, adolescence, and early adulthoods in Korea. They are attended by the waitresses and sit under a fixture of wooden beams and small globe lights that emit a dim and yellow glow. On top of that fixture lies a flat, slated wooden roof. It looks as though they're gathered in a hanok, the traditional homes I see on my mom's laptop when she watches Korean period dramas. The diners look frozen in time, and I wonder for how long and for who else a place like this will feel like home. Thank you. And now we'll be hearing from Mark Berry.
Thank you, Nicole. This is the opening scene for my short story called Collision Course. Hope you enjoy it. This stretch of road was known to be haunted, especially for Wayman. Ghosts of his past littered the 2-lane like fast food wrappers, crumpled beer cans, and lipstick-stained cigarette butts. Wayman used to bring his high school sweethearts out here on Friday nights, finding the darkest spots along the woods for sweaty intimacy. Now, 10 years later and alone, he drove here to remember and forget. On the truck's AM radio, Bill Monroe wailed, "I wonder where you are tonight." Wayman posed the same question. A blurry shape darted across his headlight beams. His front fender clipped the object. Organic matter struck chrome. Maybe possum or dog. No, too big. Must have been a deer. Whatever it was had spun out of view, then reappeared in his side view mirror. Now a very still, dark mass. The worn-out brake pads ground metal on metal, and the truck skidded to a stop. Wayman fumbled in the glove box for his Smith & Wesson. He lurched from the cab, blinded momentarily by the tall grasses, white like knives in the high beams. "Just keep your damn hands steady," he told himself. "You're thinking way too much again. Just pull the trigger and get it over with. Put it out of its misery, quick and easy." A moaning harmonized with the engine's churning pistons and the low rattling of the rusted tailpipe, almost human sounding. Screeching soon drowned out the groans, the tinny vibrations of the invisible cicadas reclaiming the night. Wayman stumbled over 2 empty beer bottles, his road beers, which had fallen out of the driver's side door. They tinkled against each other, but didn't shatter. He reached out to steady himself, and his high school class ring clanked against the hood like a gunshot. Wait, what if it ain't just roadkill? What then? There's no way on God's green earth you're going to pass a breathalyzer this time, he thought. Come on, you know what you saw. That thing weren't human. But how could you be so sure? Weren't expecting something to cross the road like that, not out here in the middle of nowhere. Wayman approached the black mass, and it unfolded and expanded into a more recognizable shape, a bulk with legs and arms. Holy hell, maybe the stories were real. So this was science, not murder. Come on, you've shot plenty of things before, he considered. So this ain't no different. If you think about it, you're doing a service. You might be answering questions, big questions, doing good for once, proving things. In the flashing red-yellow glow of hazard lights, Wayman hesitated, a realization of being all alone. Well, not quite alone, but close. A derelict house in the distance was obscured in the darkness of the tree line. No light in its windows, or where windows should be. No dogs barking, no mailbox even. Nothing to signal human habitation except the dim outline of shelter and what appeared to be a black van tucked nearly out of view. Wayman relaxed his grip on the truck's bed rail. Imagine all that money and fame for bagging this thing. Probably never have to work again, at least not pushing the latest mobile phones and bullshit payment plans. Adrenaline gushed through his bloodstream. The gun grew lighter. 3 shots left in the cylinder. Plenty for a job like this, if done right. Locked and loaded, like harvesting a wounded deer, he muttered, "Come on, you ain't the nobody they think you are. After tonight, they're going to see you again for who you truly are, a somebody." Where the shadowed figure's head should be, 2 reflective green eyes glared back, inhuman, almost mechanical. His index finger pulsed, fear and physical memory coming together to produce 3 sparks in the night. Pow, pow, pow. Then a temporary silence, followed by a spurt of gravel and grunts. Wayman bellowed as the dark presence lumbered away, its taunting howl receding and echoing around him. The truck's gas-dry engine sputtered to a stop. Wayman's beer-spit profanity filled the momentary silence until the indifferent cicadas, veiled in the dark canopy of trees, whirred once more. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. That was an amazing reading, and congratulations to all of our graduates. And thank you to all of our guests for coming.